there, everyone, and welcome inside the Bahakel Sports studio for the premiere episode of Game On. I am Bahakel Sports Director Jeff Taylor, and every Monday night we'll take a look back at some of the great high school sports action from the week before, and we'll get you set for the week ahead. We'll bring you highlights from the gridiron, the soccer field, and the volleyball court. We'll catch up with cross-country teams, tennis teams, and the ladies hitting the links. And once a week, we will tell some of the great stories playing out in high school sports. And to get us started, let's take a look at some of the big action on the gridiron this past Friday night. And to do that, we start with our Bahakel Sports Game of the Week between Butler and Richmond. And it was a great night for Butler, looking for win one of the season. Not so good for Richmond. Number 12, Doris Lewis, with a couple of rushing touchdowns on the night to start the scoring for Butler. They'd be up 14-0 before you could blink an eye. Then it would be some time for special teams action. The Butler Bulldogs would return not one punt on the night, but 2 punts on the night for touchdowns, all within a couple of minutes of each other. Everything clicking for Coach Brian Hales and Butler. The defense would show up and show out. The Butler Bulldogs pull away tonight as they beat up on Richmond. Your final score from Butler, the Bulldogs 50, Richmond 13. And now for some more action from Friday night. The Independence Patriots played host to Hickory Ridge. The Patriots came into the season with a ton of momentum, finishing out the year as the Tri-Conference champs. Last week, head coach DJ McFadden and his team had a tough loss against Mallard Creek out at Memorial Stadium during the kickoff classic. The Raging Bulls of Hickory Ridge fell in a shootout as well against J.M. Robinson. Some complications with Independence home field. The two teams faced off at Rocky River, and they put on a show. 14 near the end of the half, tied up. Caden Haydenswood zings one in the middle of the end zone to Dominique Testa to tie things up. Haywood calls his own number, goes over the big defender, but it would not take long for the Patriots to answer. Running back Jane Jones fields the kickoff, races back and forth across the field until he finds the sidelines. He breaks a couple of tackles and meets a defender at the goal line. The Raging Bulls would find the end zone again right before the half ended, but it wouldn't give them enough momentum to come away with a win. Indy tacks on their first win of the season in a remarkable fashion, 75-49. Meanwhile, a matchup featuring an out-of-state team was Chambers taking on Benedictine out of Georgia. Chambers playing for the first time this season, the Cadets coming all the way from Savannah, and they try to catch the Cougars off guard with the onside kick at the very beginning of the game, and all it did was give Chambers some great field position. The onside kick, of course, Benedictine getting warmed up there. The onside kick would come up. It wouldn't take long for Chambers to find the end zone for the first time this season. Trey Robertson TD'd to Armand Wright. Chambers has a huge presence on social media, and it's easy to tell when you see the amount of cameras on the sideline. However, on the ensuing kickoff, Rashawn Matthews is going to take this return to perfection. Only one man to beat as he breaks through some of the defenders. The one he has to beat is the kicker. The kicker does not come close, folks. Robinson had his hands full under center. Multiple interceptions led to points for the Cadets. One of the top quarterbacks in the country, Luke Krummelhoek, had a TD pass to Hayden Hoffmans. Things just got out of hand from there. Benedictine hands Chambers a loss in their first week. They have a chance to bounce back in our game of the week this week when they play Glenn. Final game for the night, we check in on South Meck facing Providence. Two tough teams with losses in week one, both looking for week one wins on the season. The Panthers of Providence were strong right from the opening kickoff. They won the toss, put together a drive that was capped off with a 5-yard quarterback keeper by Jackson Deeby. The PAT was no good, and the Panthers led 6-0. Now, last week, South Meck had trouble on special teams, and it would continue tonight. Their first possession deep inside their own territory, the punt is going to be blocked, setting Providence up with great field position. Special teams always play a big part in games. The Panthers would make them pay after the blocked punt. Jackson Deeby is going to find Alex Colavadas for the score. Jackson Deeby already has a couple of Division I offers. Nice catch by Kolavakis. Providence wins this one in a blowout, 46-0 over South Beck. So it was a great Friday night around the Queen City as well as a hot one. And to help us put a wrap on week 2 of high school football, we bring in Darren Vaught, who called the action for Bahakel Sports last football season and will be in the booth this season for our game of the week on Friday night. Darren, thanks for joining us. And as we look back to week 1, what stood out from what took place around the area, in week 2? Just talk to me a little about this past week.
Yeah, Jeff, a pleasure as always to talk to you, especially about the high school football in this area that we love so much. One of the more impressive things that struck me about week 2 came in our Bahakel Sports game of the week. Look, Butler bounced back after starting the season 0-1. This is a team that's got a lot of expectations around them. The win against Richmond, which is coming off of a down year, but historically a very good program, 7 state championships in the Raiders' history. You mentioned those special teams plays. Couple of punt return touchdowns for a guy named DeQuadre Currents, who was electric on returns, not even just on the touchdowns. And they blocked a couple of kicks as well, both off of a hand of Neo Espinoza is his name. But I'll get into a couple more that you didn't mention and weren't in the highlights there that really impressed me from week 2. Mallard Creek with a big win in their first week over, as you mentioned, a very, very solid Independence team last week. Well, they got pitted against Buford out of Georgia on Friday. Now, that's one of the best high school football teams in the country. They've got the number 1 quarterback, the number 1 overall prospect in the 2024 class named Dylan Rayola. Mallard Creek held him scoreless through the first quarter, kept it low scoring, and it came down to a game-winning field goal to beat the Mavericks, and they nearly toppled what is, by most regards, a top 5 high school football team in the country. So even on a loss, the Mavericks really impressed me in week 2, especially, again, coming off of an impressive victory over a tough Independence team in week 1. Their defense is always stout. They have a knack for forcing turnovers and turning those into touchdowns. One last one for you. West Charlotte. We had these guys at the Turf Kings Invitational at Memorial Stadium in their week 1 victory over Palisades. Sort of a clunky game for the Lions against Palisades. I mean, that's a matchup that I think many expected them to handle, and they had a bit more frustration than they wanted. This was another one that they eked out over Monroe. They had to come back a few times, but you and I both know Sam Griner, there's a grit to him, and his guys, his players reflect that. They've shown it through 2 weeks. It hasn't always been pretty, but they're 2-0.
Coach Griner has some grit. So, Darren, game of the week this week that folks can live stream starting at 7:15 is Glenn traveling to take on Chambers. Chambers comes in 0-1 after losing to Georgia powerhouse Benedictine 42-9. Glenn comes in at 1-1. Can you give us some early insight into this matchup?
Yeah, a little bit. It's an interesting one. Excuse me. Glenn is a team out of Kernersville, so the Triad region of North Carolina, that's seen a lot of success in recent years. They've got an impressive player on the defensive line named Tyrell Patterson this year. Think if you are an ACC college football fan, they had a guy a number of years ago named Javari Ritzy. Well, he's now a big-time player on defense at the University of North Carolina. That's sort of Patterson's profile. For Chambers, as it interests the Charlotte area audience, to me, this is kind of week 1 for them. The Benedictine game, you can take some things from it, but it's not a true reflection of what they're going to be against the area teams in every case. They've got some talent, a lot of it that has come back from a year ago. You mentioned their starting quarterback earlier. They've got Arian Concepcion in addition to Armand Wright, who caught the touchdown you showed earlier, a talented position player whose brother KJ was with the program last year and is now a member of the NC State Wolfpack. So again, a lot of talent on the field, but a couple of teams where the book is still out on what they're going to be this year. It should be sort of an interesting table setter for Chambers.
Cool. Last question for you. You've had a front seat to a lot of high school football action in the Queen City and surrounding areas. Just how good is the competition and how good is the coaching?
It's better than I could have imagined. You and I have talked off air. I grew up in a small area in southwestern Virginia. Most high schools were 1A, so we're dealing with much bigger schools in the Charlotte area now. My eyes had not been opened to the high school football in this area until I started calling games a couple of years ago. And it seems like every week we've got, man, this guy's got an offer from this power program. This guy's got an offer from this power program. The rivalries are intense. I love the crowds and the fan bases. They get energized. The communities rally around these teams. There was nothing. There's nothing like a good high school environment, such as at Butler High School on Friday, where I think it was Hawaii night for whatever reason. The students
Exactly.
were decked out in their luau gear. They went bananas every time the Bulldogs made a great play. Man, I can't say enough good things about the high school football in this area, both in its quality, its impact. There are other words like I'm sure I could associate with it as well that are just as important. But it's been really, really cool and really special for me personally to be a part of.
Hey, Darren Vaught, thanks for your time and look forward to hearing the call on Friday night as Glenn and Chambers play in our Bahakel Sports Game of the Week, which you can live stream starting at 7 on BahakelSports.com. Now, for all of your football highlights and scores, make sure you head over to BahakelSports.com every Friday night at 11 for the Blitz as the Bahakel Sports team brings you up to date on all the gridiron action. And coming up next, we'll take a look at some of the boys' soccer and girls' volleyball matchups that took place last week. Stick around. Game On rolls on right after this. Hey everyone, welcome back inside the Bahakel Sports Studio on our premiere episode of Game On. While football teams hit the field every Friday night, there's a ton of action around our area when it comes to other high school sports that are played in the fall. Now, one of those is boys soccer, and there were some great matchups this past week. And we start with Myers Park, who traveled to Huff to take on the Huskies. And after regulation and extra action, this one ended in a tie. Huff led at the break 1-0. That would be all the scoring for the Huskies. Myers Park scored one in the second half. Senior Paul Abril would score for Myers Park. The Huskies' lone goal came from junior Gavin Trosh. Myers Park is 1-0-2 on the season. They travel to take on Providence tomorrow night at 7. The Huff Huskies now stand at 1-0-1. They take on Lake Norman. Tomorrow night's matchup is at Lake Norman. Meanwhile, the Providence Panthers traveled to Parkwood on Wednesday in another men's soccer matchup, and this one was never in doubt for the Panthers. Providence would score 9 in this one, while Parkwood could not get the ball in the goal all night. Sophomore Paul Artis would score, get this, 4 goals for the Panthers. Liam Nilsson, a senior, would add 3, while senior Carlos Bernez and Gabe Scascato would each add 1 for the total of 9 for the Panthers. Providence moved to 1-2-2 on the season, while Parkwood dropped to 1-3-1. More for you this past Tuesday, South Point taking on the Audrey Kell this past week, and it would not go well for the Red Raiders. Audrey Kell had a 1-0 lead at halftime. South Point would score 1 goal in the second, but the Knights of AK would add 4 more to win this one, 5-1. Reed Schunkwiller would be the leading scorer for the Knights. He had 2 goals on the day, while South Point's lone goal would come from senior Carson McClure. AK now sits at 3-1-1 on the season, while South Point is at 1-1. AK travels to take on Forest View on Wednesday night of this week. And Statesville taking on South Iredell, this one being hosted by Statesville, who was looking to avoid going to 0-3 to start the season. It would not happen, however. South Iredell led 2-1 at the break. They would add another goal in the second half. Statesville would go scoreless in that half. The Vikings of South Iredell get the win. It is their first win of the season. Senior Jake DeBott scored 2 goals for South Iredell, who now travel to Mallard Creek for a matchup tomorrow night. Statesville is playing as we speak against Bandy and are looking for win 1 on the season. And one more stop for you. Central Cabarrus taking on Sun Valley, and this one would be all Sun Valley. The Spartans would score 2 goals in the first half and would add 2 more in the second. Senior Vincent Gallardo would score 2. He had 4 goals against Sun Valley. Iverth Cabrera, a senior, and Manny Flores, a freshman, would add 1 goal each to secure the win for Sun Valley. The Spartans win a midweek matchup over Central Cabarrus 4-1. Sun Valley would get another win on Thursday over Palisades to go to 2-1-1 on the season. Central Cabarrus is 0-2 on the season. Now, while there are games being played outside, there's action inside gyms across the area as girls volleyball takes center stage during the fall. One of those matchups this past week was seen on BahakelSports.com between Providence and Sun Valley. This one took place at Sun Valley. This was our Bahakel Sports Game of the Week, as I mentioned, for girls volleyball. Sun Valley had their way with Providence on this night, who had a tough time getting things going. Long volleys back and forth. Sun Valley, however, is just too tough on this night. Sun Valley would win the first 2 sets. Providence would try to get their game on, but they couldn't. They tried to make it tough in the third, but it would not work out. Sun Valley wins it in straight sets, and after the game, Kendall Lewis, who was on the call for Bahakel Sports, caught up with Sun Valley head coach Adam Carmen.
We welcome you back to BahakelSports.com. Kendall Lewis alongside the head coach Adam Carmen. Coach Carmen, dominating win tonight in straight sets. You guys improved to 5-1. It was really the Riley Parker show. We know that she's not just one of the best players in her class, but arguably one of the best players in the state of North Carolina.
Yeah, she's capable of running our offense as a setter, but she also has, a mean attack. Yeah. Can pull that out whenever we need it. And then complementing her is our outside, Kira Joy. She basically, between the two of them, they're a force to be reckoned with on other people's defense.
Yeah. No question about it. This is your first year as the head coach. So when you inherited this team, kind of what were some goals you set? Obviously, this is a program that made it all the way to the state title game last year.
So there was a lot of talk about rebuilding. And I just don't see it. I know there was a ton lost because there was so much that was graduated from last year. But there's still a lot of talent in this program. Yeah. So I think we're building. We're not rebuilding.
Yeah. And you've got some really good young talent tonight. We saw multiple freshmen come in and play. Talk about some of those younger players that are going to be around for the next few years.
So we got behind Parker, who's a sophomore. We've got a good freshman class. McKenna Shelton plays right side and setter. Our middle, Emery Cole. And we've got our other outside hitter, Blair Simpson. So the three of them, I can't wait to see their growth.
So you lose your first match. You've now won 5 straight matches. What's been the difference in those matches the last couple of weeks?
The biggest thing is the match that we lost to a defending state champ, and we kind of had some errors down the stretch. Ever since then, we've played with just an incredible heart. When our back's up against the wall, we come back. We won some really close sets. Mallard Creek was not an easy foe, so we're just able to do that.
Thanks, Coach. We appreciate it. Best of luck to you the rest of the way. Sun Valley is 5-1, folks, and they are winners tonight on our Bahakel Sports Game of the Week.
Now another good matchup last week on the court was Palisades taking on Huff at Huff. The Lady Huskies looking to stay undefeated on the season, sitting at 8-0. The ladies from Palisades just looking to get going as that school just opened its doors last school year. Palisades would hang tough and win one set, but in the end, the Lady Huskies were just too tough. Huff wins this one 3-1 to go 9-0 on the season. And our final volleyball game takes us to North Iredell, who played host to Lake Norman. The girls from North Iredell won the state 3A championship last season. During the offseason, they made the jump to 4A. This matchup with powerhouse Lake Norman would be a good one. Lake Norman would win this one 3-2. Lake Norman now sits at 8-0 on the season and are playing Porter Ridge as we speak, a matchup between two undefeated teams. Now, we still have 2 more segments to go, and coming up next, we'll hear from one local football team who had a special homecoming this past Friday night. Stick around. Hey, welcome back to Game On. For the first time since 2019, the West Charlotte Lions played a football game on their home turf. After renovations to the stadium and construction over the past 4 years, head coach Sam Greiner and his team finally got a chance to kick off a game this past Friday night as they played host to Monroe. Before the game, however, Bahakel Sports anchor Jack Taylor caught up with the Lions to talk about coming home after playing at middle schools and other high schools around our area.
Friday Night Lights. There's nothing quite like playing high school football in front of the home crowd. It's an experience not a single player at West Charlotte has ever had. One of the city's oldest schools completed a long overdue renovation process last year. The Lions have practiced on the new field for 3 years, but complications delayed the completion of the stadium parking lot and the field's debut. Head coach Sam Greiner came to the program in 2020 when the pandemic kept them off of their home field, and since then, he has had to bus his team to every home game, hosted by other schools across the area.
I mean, it's a long time coming. You know, there's nothing different than a home game at West Charlotte. It's a different environment than anywhere you can ever go. I remember coming here in the past for the opposing team, and it's a little bit intimidating. Never played in their home stadium. They've been practicing here for 3 years, and they've never got to look into the stadium. It's to be able to look in your home stadium and look out and say, look, I got the support I need.
Now the long-awaited day is finally here. And on Friday night, the Lions get the chance to man the throne for the first time this decade.
Knowing this is going to be our first home game back, you know, we're going to play hard, fast. We've been waiting for this since freshman year.
And with weather pushing the game to a primetime slot, the pride of Beatties Ford Road is ready to show out under the LED lights. Reporting in Charlotte, Jack Taylor, Bahakel Sports.
And it was a great homecoming for West Charlotte as they got the win 43-29 over Monroe. The Lions are now 2-0 on the season. This Friday night, West Charlotte is home once again as they play host to Independence. So stay tuned. We have one more segment to go on Game On. We'll give you a sneak peek at this week's 704 High School Highlight Podcast with Bahakel Sports football analyst Reggie Walker. We'll be right back. And welcome back to our final segment of Game On. I am Bahakel Sports Director Jeff Taylor. Now, back in December, we started a podcast that focuses solely on high school sports in our area. It is called the 704 High School Highlight Podcast, and it comes out every Friday on BahakelSports.com. Now, this week's guest is Reggie Walker, who is a part of the broadcast team every Friday night on our Bahakel Sports Game of the Week. Here's a quick look.
That's exactly right. And I think when you think about some of the names you mentioned, Chad Greer's another one that comes to mind as well. And I could go down.
The list is huge.
Sam Greiner.
Yep.
Kennedy Tinsley up at Mallard Creek. Matt
Coach
Jenkins,
Simmons at
formerly
Palisades.
of-
And all these brand new coaches.
Well, and that's the thing that's interesting, right? Is the new coaches are scary good, right? You think about Simmons at Palisades. You think about both Chris James at Charlotte Christian and Myers Park, right? Same name, different person.
Right, exactly.
Different person. They understand it, and I think what helps is a lot of them obviously played high school football or around it, but played and or coached at the college level.
Right.
So they understand when you have sort of those limitations with your time and you have to maximize, they understand how to build a practice plan that's the most efficient and effective for both player development and game plan implementation.
Right.
And that's two different things that I think sometimes people don't think about.
And my thanks to Reggie Walker. He is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to football. He sat down with me and we talked football on the 704 High School Highlight podcast. So as we wrap up this episode of Game On, a quick reminder of the action you can catch on BahakelSports.com. Tomorrow night you can catch Weddington taking on South Meck in boys soccer. And then Friday night, Glen High School from Winston-Salem travels to the Queen City to take on Chambers, who will be looking for win number 1 in our game of the week. So that is it for our premiere of Game On. Thanks for joining us, and make sure you stay with Bahakel Sports for all your high school coverage. Have a great week.